Hello, everyone. I think it's still morning yet, so good morning to you. My name is Edith Hudson, and I have been a lifelong servant leader. I am a first-generation child, and I didn't know that truly my bossiness was what made me a servant leader, but always looking to help my sibling and my family members. So, been involved in servant leadership really for my entire life, but formally really recognized maybe about 10 years ago or so that I was part of the servant leadership movement, served my community with Milwaukee's Police Department for about 25 years, retired, and now I'm serving the community again, but as the leader of the Marquette University Police Department. So I will continue my life of service and definitely work to impact the community just as you're doing, Dick. So thank you.
Wonderful, Edith. I'm Dick Pieper. A few of you don't know me. I've been in the electrical business for 52 years, 60 years actually, but 52 formally. Married, 53 years, 3 children, 11 grandchildren, all live within 20 minutes. Nobody in jail and nobody in the hospital. So I am really blessed. I also really, similar story. I started out my life very early, not knowing my journey in a servant leadership. And so I've been on it a long time. But about 15 years ago, we discovered the Greenleaf Center and some of the works, and we'll be talking to some of that. The main purpose of this session is to go over the nuts and bolts. Everybody likes the nuts and the bolts. Even though they've been here 10 times, they still want to go over the basics. So that's what we're going to do. Edith and I are. So this is the seminal statement. Do those served grow as persons? Do they, while being served, become healthier, wiser, more autonomous, more likely themselves to become servants? When you look about you, how did your mom, your dad raise you? How does your supervisor, your company, follow, treat, enhance you? These are tough tests. Nobody gets it all. Nobody gets it all. And do people follow your example as a result? What's the effect on the least privileged in society? That's a nice tough one. Will they not be further deprived in the way in which you lead? So with that, any comments about that one?
I do. I actually have a story.
Give us
about
the story.
Seminole statement. So in my work with Milwaukee's Police Department, I had the privilege of working with a young man who was a community leader in a neighborhood around 2nd and Center Street, if any of you are familiar with the city of Milwaukee. And this young man totally committed to his neighborhood. He was the Block Watch captain at 19 years old, and just an awesome young man with a heart to lead. And he doesn't look like your typical leader. He had a lot of tattoos and at first glance really didn't look like someone that you would expect to be a Block Watch leader. Well, he became a little bit disenchanted that his service wasn't received in the way that he had thought it could be or should be received. So he left Milwaukee, went to another town, and I just felt he'll be back. He is destined for service to this community. He'll be back. So about 2 or 3 years later, after our initial encounter, he came back. He called me and he said, I want to thank you for being such a great example for me because I have applied for the police department and I'll be in the police academy class in the next couple of weeks, and I just want to thank you. I was so pleased that he called me, that he came back to Milwaukee because I knew he would. But I was also pleased when I saw him, maybe about a year or two later, he was assigned to do community work just as he had really as a Block Watch captain. As my team worked and served him, he's now serving a community in the same capacity. So it really does come full circle, that service that we provide for other people, they then learn and grow and become servants very similar to the way they were served.
It's very rich, but you don't know how it's going to come out. It's heart nurturing. Research, lots of it. Put others first. These statements are from research papers, academic, PhDs that have proven these statements. And this is another pass at some of these statements that we have in the hallway there. Put others first. Help others to grow and succeed. That's what Edith did. And I'll bet everybody in this room to some degree has been doing it. It's the natural inclination. Greenleaf said that. It's natural. Demonstrates professional skills. Empowers others, not themselves. Acts ethically. Are champions of the community. These are the new seminal ones that have come out of research in the last 5 or 8 years, worldwide. This material, and you'll see it at the end, I'll give you a list that we have on our website, has just skyrocketing in the world. Skyrocketing. Servant leadership is no longer a foreign term in Wisconsin. I met with the governor, and he said, I told him what we're doing in character education, servant leadership, and he said, oh, I had a bunch of these business guys in here, and that's all they wanted to talk about. He was astounded. Our past governor spoke of servant leadership. Our mayor speaks of servant leadership. Any award banquet that I've been to, they speak of servant leadership. Now here's the seminal. These are authors, and Ken Keith wrote the book, The Case for Servant Leadership, just loaded with examples, explicits. Don Frick wrote the biography of Greenleaf. And what I call Robert Greenleaf's quotes really comes from another author that was in the center. Today, we're talking about stewardship. Stewardship. I'll give you an example of stewardship. People don't just, you can give your time, your position, how you can network in a community. You can give your dollars. That's the easiest thing to do. Your time is a little tougher. Your position, that can be challenging for some. Depends on where you're at. We had somebody who was obviously going to be the president of one of our companies. And I couldn't get him to give to United Way. Just could not. So every year, he had this reason, that reason, this other reason, this other reason. Finally, I got him to give something, 1,000 or 2. I figured, well, that's as far as I'm going to get. He retires. He comes back to help out one of our companies. And in that company, he challenged that whole unit, business unit, to start participating in United Way, and he personally would match every dollar they came up with. So that's a big transition. He also said in my biography I put together for my grandchildren that he learned the art and the fun of giving. He looks forward every year at the end of the year to do his giving. So you don't know, and he was a charger. He was in your face. He would debate and argue with you. A very good guy. But that's what happened to him. Stewardship.
Stewardship.
Time, position, resources, money. Top-down power model. That's what we have been accustomed to. Servant leadership is completely different. Another term we use is lead by serving. People are more comfortable with that term. Servitude or serve. This is about serving. Lift up the capacity of others. Light the way. Moral authority granted. When you are a servant leader, you automatically get moral authority. It's just, you don't even know why or what or how did that happen, but all of a sudden they start calling you differently than they would another person. You have any thoughts on any of this?
I think especially with law enforcement, the moral authority is something that is especially important because what we do, I think, stands out maybe a little bit more. Our mishaps especially stand out a little bit more. And if you don't have that moral authority as you lead people in that industry, then I think you really is disastrous. Absolutely disastrous.
It is. Questions you have of us?
How can we take the discourse that's going on in this country and reduce it so that we can have more of the servant leadership characteristics from our political leaders and our political, I should say our political leaders to become those examples?
That's a political question. I think you'd better handle that one.
Yeah, we don't. I want to, about the political environment. I went to a national meeting, 3 days in Washington, D.C., character education. I came home and I was thunderstruck with my reflection. Not once did anybody bring up a political question in any meeting, and it was a lot of in-depth exchanges. Then the next week I went to England, the UK Greenleaf Center, and they were having their annual meeting. And for 2 days, the same thing. I'm not too sure that we should be paying attention to that. Do you know, in the English language, I was just told by a researcher, there are 15 times more negative words than positive words. Somebody just shook their head there. But now, I don't know what that means. But I will tell you, we have 150 tapes in Wisconsin in these sessions that display to you what is going on in Wisconsin. Servant leaders don't advertise. They don't throw rocks at people. They're not out there pushing a point. They are out there to serve the greater good. The greater good. Lift up the capacity of people, not hit them over the head or throw stones at them. So servant leaders don't come out and say, you ought to do this or that. They just meet your needs. That's how you do it. And if you want to know where to get it, go to the website. We got all these videos. Sean here has been a terrific editor. And they're excellent. Excellent. You can pull them into your group meetings. You can pull them into a discussion group. You can pull them into your classroom, into your company. You can suggest it to other people that have these questions. Questions. That was a little bit too hard, but, thank you for the question. We wouldn't have the discussion otherwise. Questions?
Question was, how do I, with the rules-based really world that law enforcement operates in, kind of work around that to encourage servant leadership for myself and for my team? Well, it is my belief that a lot of what officers do is discretionary. I mean, the law is the law, but a lot of it and our application of it can be discretionary. So giving officers the ability to understand that their thoughts about how they perform their duty is respected and appreciated, giving them and creating an environment where their wellness, their self-awareness is something that we focus on. I was recently at a conference. The International Association of Chiefs of Police holds a yearly conference that's pretty well attended by police chiefs from all over the country. And over the years, the themes have varied. But this year, the majority of the sessions were on officer wellness, on secondary trauma that officers suffer and the potential impact on their ability to do their job and to apply discretion when it's necessary. Also, compassion fatigue was something that was discussed as well. And if you are fatigued with compassion, you truly cannot provide the best service possible. So knowing that those are now concerns, law enforcement is focusing much, much more on our personal wellness and then the ability for us to deliver our service to our communities, respective communities, by just making sure that we're well. Because if we're not well, then the discretion is really flawed. Compassion fatigue is, one of the most important things that I think a police officer can display is compassion for the community that they're serving. And after a while, just as others that are experiencing trauma directly, officers began to kind of absorb that as well. And after a while, it becomes challenging for them to be compassionate or as compassionate as we would like for them to be. They don't see that what they do makes a difference. They don't think that the community supports them or anybody cares about them. And then it makes it a little bit challenging, I think, for them, the decision-making process. So there's a lot of research going on right now to try to determine whether or not, or not determine whether or not, we know it exists, but try to figure out how to make officers more compassionate so that they begin to, I think, conform just a little bit more to what society expects of us and not just what we've done for years, because that's just what we've done.
There's another piece of knowledge, a lady that's writing about this, had written a number of books and speaks, and she would build a case that today versus, say, 50 years ago, or in the past, we have less relationships than we had. As a result, and that people are hardwired, she would use that term, to be with other people. And unless you're with other people, other things can happen. And she would say our cell phones, the disconnect in our society has created less relationships, less family, and as a result, our suicide rate is up. Same thing, I think.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The schools today, number one thing, schools, what do you think number one in the schools are right now? It's definitely in the bullying area and the trauma that results. To the bully, the bullied, and this is interesting, the person that stands by and watches, they are a part of it. So everybody is being trained on how to recognize these problems in schools, and it's a number one priority. It didn't exist 30 years ago, 40 years ago.
I'm looking at the PowerPoint, and the top-down power model is at the top. And my question is, that has been a tried and true approach in many different areas of leadership. How do you persuade people that have done it that way to try something different?
I don't know if you can persuade them, but that is part of the classic skill set of a servant leader, is persuasion. There are times when a servant leader has to be rather explicit, and this is going to be the decision, and explains it, that I've got to make this decision. But most decisions, 98%, can be made by the people doing the work in some form or the other. There is a fellow that runs Quick Trip. It's a big operation. You go in any Quick Trip. How many people have been in a Quick Trip? Okay. How many of you would say that it's special? Of the people going Quick Trip, 60% of them said it's special. So just go in a Quick Trip and ask them, how do you like working here? And watch what they say. And they all say the same thing, similar. They love working there. It's an ethical environment. The fellow that runs the place is over 80 years old. I suspect he's one of the guys that talked to the governor and said, hey, I don't know how there's no formula, there's no class, but people within the company can provide an example. If they don't have a power need, they can influence. All of us are influencers. We can raise questions. And servant leadership, I mean, the data, this is a bit old, but the S&P 500 returns on equity is 10.8. The guy that wrote the book on excellence in companies, they had 16.6, and servant leader companies have 24.3. So if the power guy has trouble understanding it, point him over there. If the focus is profit, that's all there is. Drucker said, eventually you'll fail. Now you can have a profit focus, but you've got to have the others as well. In my presentation, I'm going to go over there and check it. There's no answer. It's an evolving, organic, quantum movement. And the high performers tend to be in the servant leader category. Southwest Airlines is another one. The Box Company, they're there. They started off at the beginning that way.